Hi, Workplace Math 10 students. Today we're going to be looking at how to use the tangent function. So far we have looked at the sine function and the cosine function, and today is the last of the three trigonometric functions called the tan function. So the assignment that you're going to be seeing is 7.2D, Trigonometry Part 4, Mathletics, and we're going to be looking at how to do the Mathletics assignment called tan A. So let's get into this. The first thing that we want to remind ourselves of is the three different functions that we have in trigonometry. So we have the sine function, which once again is opposite over hypotenuse. We have the cosine function, which is adjacent side length over hypotenuse side length. And then today what we're going to look at is the tangent function, which is opposite side length over adjacent side length. So in that acronym that we've been learning, we are looking at today TOA, which basically stands for tangent is opposite over or divided by adjacent. So remember once again that there are three terms that we generally refer to the three different sides of a right triangle. So the longest side is the longest side, which is directly opposite the 90-degree angle, is the hypotenuse. The side that is directly opposite the angle that we are told, the theta angle, is called opposite, and then the other angle, the remaining angle is called, side is adjacent. So once again, the hypotenuse is always directly opposite the 90-degree angle. The theta angle that we are given, directly opposite that is what we call the opposite, and then the remaining side length is adjacent. So let's take a look at tan, which deals with opposite over adjacent. So in this particular case, we have a question here, and what it's wanting to know is it's wanting to know what the angle theta is. So we don't know this unknown angle. But what we can see is in the relation to this angle, if we go directly opposite this angle, that this 4 is the opposite side. And then the hypotenuse is over here. So we're not even told the hypotenuse. We don't know what the hypotenuse is. So what we do know is the opposite, and we know this last side length, which is adjacent. So we know two side lengths. The opposite is 4, and the adjacent is 3. And so therefore, if we were to write this out, we know that tan of theta is going to be opposite side length over adjacent side length. So we substitute in what we know, which is the opposite is 4 for the side length, and the adjacent is 3. So I plug those into my formula here. And now what I want to do is I want to get theta by itself. So I need to eliminate tan. So the opposite of tan is tan to the -1, or in other words, inverse. And so I am going to do that to both sides, which would clear this out. And so I have theta by itself, and then on this side, I'm going to have the inverse of tan and 4/3. So let's take a look at how we can solve this now. I'm just going to clear out some of this writing that I put on here, and we'll take a look at the calculator and see how we can get that to calculate. So if I go to my computer calculator, what I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to take 4 divided by, because that line in the fraction means divided by, 4 divided by 3, which is 1.333. I'm going to take the inverse, and in this case, it's tan to the -1, that's inverse tan. And so what I'm going to end up with is a value of 53.1301. So if I go back to my screen here, we'll see that this is why this is our answer, 53.1301, or in other words, 53.13 degrees is the angle of this theta. Now, just to take a look at another way of looking at solving this, this would be the very similar type of way of solving it, but maybe using a calculator that looks more like your iPhone. So in this case, we would go 4 divided by 3, which gets me this value, and then I need to use the second function. So second function on iPhone is the same as the inverse function on the computer calculator. And now I'm going to see a tan of -1, or in other words, the inverse tan. And so I'm going to arrive at that 53.13 value, just like I had before. So hopefully that makes sense. So let's take a look at the next question here. So this one is involving us trying to find out not the angle this time, but one of the side lengths. And in this particular case, because this is directly opposite of the angle we know, what we're trying to find out here is this is the opposite angle. And then once again, this is the hypotenuse here, which we're not told at all. So really what we're dealing with here is opposite, which we want to know, and the adjacent, which we do know. So what we're left with here is we know one side, which is the adjacent, which is 10, and we know the theta angle, which is 42. So we can write this up as tan of 42 degrees, and then we can substitute in what we know. So the adjacent comes down at the bottom, and then the angle we don't know, we'll call that B for right now, it comes at the top, is the opposite side. Now, in order to figure this out, basically what we need to do is we can just simply multiply. If we multiplied both sides by 10, what we're going to end up with here is we're going to have B by itself, and we're going to have to multiply tan of 42 degrees by 10. So let's take a look at how we do that. So I'm just going to clear off some of this writing here so it doesn't get all messy. And then we're going to go, and I'm going to switch my screen so you can see the calculator. So in this case here, what we want to do is we would like to find out what 42 tan, and we're not taking the inverse this time, just tan, so 42 tan, and then we're going to multiply that by the number 10. And so this is going to get us this 9.0040, and so basically what we end up with here is this 9.0440, and that's why this answer here is correct. Hopefully that makes sense to you. So let's take a look at the last type of question. So this time, what we're looking at here is we are looking at knowing just one side length, and that side length is the opposite side length, because it's directly opposite the 53 degrees. What we don't know is the adjacent side length. So what we have is we know the opposite side length, which is 5, and we know the 53 degrees that is theta. So we can plug that 53 in here for the theta, and we can substitute in the opposite side length here for 5, and then what we don't know, we're calling it C. C is the adjacent. So in this case here, this is a little bit different, because in order for us to get C by itself, what we'd actually have to have done is we'd have to multiply by C, both sides, and that would have canceled out these C's here. But then I have C by itself here, and in order for me to get rid of the tan of 53 degrees, I have to actually physically divide both sides by tan of 53 degrees. And that's why we end up with 5 over tan of 53 degrees is equal to C. Now, how do I solve for this? Well, let's take a look. So if I were to go in here and choose calculator, what I'm going to need to do in this case here is I'm going to need to do the 5 first. Then I need to put the division sign in, because that's what that line in the fraction means. And then I'm going to open the bracket here. And then I'm going to type in 53, because that's the tan. And then I'm just hitting the tan button. And then I'm going to close the bracket and then hit equal sign. And so what we end up with here is a value of 3.7677, or rounded 3.77. And so if I were to come back into this screen, you can see that this is the value we get, and that would round up to 3.77 units. Now let's just quickly take a look at how we could solve that using this calculator style as well. So once again, we are looking at the tan of 53, so 5 over tan of 53. So how do we solve that? So we would go 5 divided by, and then once again we have brackets here, so we could go bracket, and then 53, and then I don't want the second function here, so I need to take that off, and so I have just a tan, and then close the bracket, and then hit equal sign, and we're going to get that same value, 3.7677, that we got with the other calculator. And so that's how we solve the 3 different types of questions you may see in order to use tangent. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, as always, please just email me.